Morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to the August 10th meeting of the Historic Resources Board. Would staff please call roll?
Yes. Chair Bernstein.
Here.
Vice Chair Bowers absent. Board Member McKinnon.
Present.
Board Member Wimmer.
Here.
Board Member Kohler.
Here.
Board Member Bunnenberg.
Here.
Thank
We
you.
have a quorum.
Next on our agenda is oral communications. The public may speak to any item not on the agenda. And I do have one card from David Carnahan. Welcome.
Good morning, Chair Bernstein and board members. David Carnahan in the City Clerk's office, and I'm here to speak with you about a great opportunity for members of the community to give back to the community and help shape the future of the Palo Alto community. The city is currently recruiting for 2 terms on the Architectural Review Board, 4 on the Historic Resources Board, and 2 on the Planning and Transportation Commission. The application deadline is September 19th at 4:30 p.m. I'm going to hand out a flyer for each of you and put some in the back of the room, encouraging you to reach out to 2 people to encourage them, people that you know that you think would be a good fit for one of these boards and commissions, encouraging them to apply. And again, the reminder that deadline is September 19th, 4:30 p.m. Applications are available on the City Clerk's website, cityofpaloalto.org/clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, I see no other cards. Are there any agenda changes, additions, or deletions to today's?
None.
Okay, thank you. Any city official reports?
Yes, just looking at your agenda coming up for meetings, we are having the second meeting of August, which is the 24th, and I believe we have a quorum for that date. We have a couple of exciting items for that, one of which was requested by the board about the ITT building, just an update on that. And we also have agenda items for the September 14th meeting. Now, just a reminder that we are on the docket for a joint meeting with City Council on August 28th. Obviously, we're talking about potential topics today. We have an opportunity to, finalize that conversation on the 24th if need be. And we are looking actively to have a meeting with the chair, vice chair, mayor, vice mayor in the coming weeks.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next is study session, HRB discussion of potential topics for joint meeting with City Council. Will there be any staff report on this item?
Yes, just briefly, you have a report that we prepared based on some background that we have shared before. The fact that the last time we did this was in May of 2015, so it's been a while, and background information for you to call through. We have had our retreat this year. We talked about potential topics and the projects that rise to the top as far as what we're interested in tackling this year in our work program. And then, typically these meetings, again, I mentioned that we do have a brief meeting with the mayor, vice mayor, chair, vice chair, to talk about the topics that we will expect to cover. And then we always leave a little room for, something else. So, but we have to really limit what we're planning to talk about because the meeting is a short one.
Right.
But I'll let Martin lead the.
Okay. Great, thank you, and welcome, Councilmember Holman. Good. All right. So as the board members have seen on our report today, there are some suggestions, and of course we're open to other suggestions too of topics to discuss. Any board members like to start? Board Member Kohler.
I just want to remind everybody that every time we do this, we have all these schedules and everything, and we meet with the council, and the council starts talking, and next thing you know, it's all non-related to what we were going to talk about. So it's, I think we should do this, but it's almost humorous because we work so hard to do all these topics, and the next thing you know, we get to the council, and they kind of take charge and talk about what they want to talk about. And sometimes it's been really helpful, and other times it doesn't seem to get us what we were trying to do. So,
if I could respond to that, and perhaps Karen, Councilmember Holman would as well. I think sometimes the more successful of these joint meetings, there's been some sort of, brief presentation or a handout to kind of summarize the activities of the Historic Resources Board. And so I have prepared a CMR that has already been reviewed and is ready to go out to kind of say what we've been up to. And I think if the HRB members are interested in supplementing with something else, we might take a proactive approach that way, just so we make sure that they understand what's been going on in the last year or two.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Bunnenberg.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
Yeah, please, Councilmember Holman. I'm sorry.
I was, and thank you for the opportunity, willing to supplement what Amy said. So two things. One is, will the HRB staff have, or at least the HRB members have will the HRB members have an opportunity to see the CMR and comment on it? You were mentioning supplementing it, so will they see it when?
Yes, it is in a draft form right now, as far as hasn't been reviewed finally, but I believe I can share that. It's a briefer kind of version of what I prepared for today's meeting.
Okay.
As far as what we've been up to, and it does, have a recommendation for what we'd like the council to provide leadership on.
Okay, and then the other thing, to Roger's point, from my perspective, having been on both sides of this with council members, the most effective, from my perspective, the most effective joint meetings are the ones where, as Amy said, the presentations are relatively brief, and where a variety of the board or commission members participate in brief manner but cover different topics, and then there are specific questions posed to the council. Because if it is left open-ended, the council can go anywhere. But if there are specific questions posed to the council that you're requesting direction on, that's how you're most likely to elicit direct guidance and response. What would you say, Amy?
I think that's good. As noted in the report for today, I reminded all, as I did in the last Mills Act discussion that we had, or one of those reports, that something was said by one council member about the Mills Act. We ran with that. So I think to have some, and I don't know if it was a question posed, but it certainly had a bit of a focus so that we could have a little nugget of something to respond to. And so I think that's well taken as a recommendation to ask, hone down one or two questions that are the most important, or one.
Let's start us off if you want. David and I have had some discussions that after the meeting to review the replacement fire station in the park, that basically all our comments were totally ignored by the Architectural Review Board, ARB, and so we suggested various options to the glass box that's going to go in there, and it had there was no, from what we could tell, no discussion hardly at all about that option. They just went ahead and did the glass box, which I think everyone on the board was not happy with. It's a glass.
So as far as our meeting today, Roger, what would be your suggestion for a topic?
Well, I don't exactly know how to. The topic, I guess, is when we have meetings that eventually go to city council. Mm-hmm. I don't know how we arrange it such that hopefully part of what we're asking for gets done. Okay,
so it sounds like the question that we would discuss at the retreat would be, is there a process for HRB comments to get more directly reflected in the council's action?
I mean, we do what we do, but I'm just saying that somehow in the past, usually what happens is the council goes off and talks about their own stuff. And
so more directed questions.
If there's some way to ask or hope for to have some discussion.
Okay.
I mean, it's not as bad as I'm making it sound, but I remember after the last meeting, we just sort of left, and, it was sort of taken away. The discussion about part of the HRB sort of got lost, and it got kind of wandered off into.
Could I help a little bit? So, there's one example of a project that had some constraints, and you had comments about it, the HRB comments, and then the ARB had looked at those constraints and studies of something different than what they'd been shown, and then they came to their own recommendation. I understand the feelings of maybe not having been heard, but of course the minutes are provided. What I would say is, the Junior Museum and Zoo, maybe take a look at that as another project that's a city project that is going through the process that the HRB was very much listened to, and the ARB took up the charge, not only about the Girl Scout house, and in fact I think they were part of leading that charge, but also about the pitched roof, et cetera. So I think I wouldn't extrapolate one project with its constraints and say that's happening universally. So I'm sorry, I had to weigh in on that.
My only point is that in the past, I've been going to these for 20-some years, so it just basically, it's a good meeting, because I think it's good for all of us to see the council and for them to see us, but just in the past, it's sort of gone, and actually, I should say that all the things that have wandered off have not been a negative, or they have not been something that wasn't important. It's just that it's sort of, when we make our list and everything, try to get answers, it's not a big deal.
So I'll just wait finally, because maybe I was a little defensive on that since I am doing the city projects. Sorry about that. What I would just say is that governance has been a topic in the past. It's in your staff report about that it was talked about, certainly reporting out that it was talked about, and wondering if there need to be ordinance changes in the future and something to consider, that kind of thing. I mean, I think maybe not focusing it on a project, or at least if you do, don't think about just one project, and maybe we need more conversation about this.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I agree with Amy French about the ARB's response to HRB comments. Yeah, that way, yeah.
I'm sorry, that we had a small side conversation about the value of joint meetings with ARB and HRB, and we've talked about doing that. We were attempting to do that before the last time the HRB and ARB met about a specific project, but there was some issues with the numbers of items on the agenda. So we still have that out there as something worth doing, because I think, anytime you talk amongst yourself without, going up the chain, that's nice to get some things aired, perhaps. I'm sorry, you said something that I didn't hear.
Yeah, I was just, I agree with Amy French's observation about the ARB's response to the HRB's comments regarding the children's zoo. So we were listened to and acknowledged, and the ARB did kind of take over the comments that we provided on that. So there are examples where we are listened to. So thanks for it. So I agree with your observation on that. Good. All right.
Just to finalize that, I think we could resume the attempt, and hopefully we're successful, to have a joint meeting with the ARB. I mean, I think that would be of value, and I'll just bring that up again with management.
Yeah. I agree that those are very valuable too. It's that way. Words are expressed directly one way. I know, do you want to comment on this subject? Yes, yeah. Then we'll go back to you.
Just a quick question. So what triggers a joint meeting with the ARB? Because I know we just recently had one about the new residents on the corner of Waverly and Channing, and that was a group meeting. But what triggered that as opposed to not having it for the new firehouse or for other projects?
So, we had thought that having a joint meeting before the consideration of that SOFA 2 project would be a nice way to, segue into that project actually on the same meeting, and it just didn't work out that way. But, certainly SOFA 2 projects, SOFA projects are an opportunity for the boards to meet because it's mandated in the code, this coordinated development permit. So those are opportunities to have discussions, but it's about the project at hand. And I think you are seeking a more general discussion about your relationship and interaction.
I'm not sure
That's a good question, right, former Vice Chair. Yes. Beth?
Yes. In sort of thinking of the big picture of our historic resources, I thought that it might be very important to check to see, and I would recommend that we have on our inventory the buildings that are on the National Register and the buildings that are on the California Register. Most of them are, but there are some, I believe, that are not. So I'll send this down to the board members, and here are lists for the our staff and councilwoman, and it just seems to make sense to every so often check this, because things have been added, and there are also some interesting points of interest listed that might be looked at.
I see staff is taking notes of our comments today. For the meeting with Chair and Vice Chair and Mayor and Vice Mayor, the notes that I see Emily taking today, would that be, it'd be helpful to hear all of our comments and see them if you're taking notes. So when we meet with the Mayor and Vice Mayor, we can, or should we take our own notes of everything that,
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
These are just kind of my personal notes
Oh,
that
okay,
I'm
okay.
trying to just kind of gather ideas
I
and
see,
kind of
okay,
expound on things with my own ideas. We will have, obviously minutes available for everyone.
Okay, yeah. Would those minutes be available before the meeting with Mayor and Vice Mayor?
Yes, I don't believe we're going to meet next week,
Right, yeah.
so it takes our transcriptionist
good.
some time to do this. So I think just to back to the, Beth's, Board Member Vandenberg's comments, this is a list that you've handed out of Palo Alto's national, state, and county landmarks. And I guess, are you suggesting that this appear on our website in some way or links to things? Or are you actually saying that you think these should be added to the Palo Alto inventory?
We should look at adding them to our inventory and then take whatever steps
Right,
are
because
needed to do that.
I guess the inventory has individually listed properties, and for instance, the National Historic Districts that you are suggesting be added to the inventory, how that was kind of a voluntary thing and an honorary recognition for that, those tracts. And I think taking the next step and saying that's worthy of an inventory it needs to be further looked at. So as far as individual sites, I think those could warrant discussion, but I think we need a lot of discussion and some focus on this.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Any other suggestions? And the reason that, thank you for that we'll see our comments in a minutes type, because since Vice Chair Bauer's not here, that way he can hear what we're talking about today. Okay, so in our packet, there have been some suggestions of things to bring up for our joint City Council HRB meeting. Any additional comments or additions to this list? Okay. All right, I have some thoughts about that. And how does the board feel about adding this to our list? When I look at chapter 18.12.120, it lists for the R1 district home improvement exceptions. And there are several, as we all know. one of the restrictions of this home improvement exception process includes limiting it when it comes to historic properties to Category 1 or Category 2. Since there are 4 categories, my suggestion that we briefly discuss is, to add to the list, is why not include Categories 3 and 4? For example, the former University Arts Building, now the Shinola tenant building, that's Category 3. So that's just an example where the categories don't seem to be in line with the historical significance. So instead of trying to recategorize 3s and 4s that may be reviewed as categories 1 and 2, why not just kind of tweak the ordinance to include 1, 2, 3, 4? This makes it a lot easier for every owner of a historic property, rather than, because the reason I point that out, we've seen some projects come before us where there were just small little cottages listed as a Category 3, just as the Shinola building's Category 3, and then but to use the encouragement of historic preservation by using ordinances such as home improvement exceptions or other kind of, the applicant had to write a report saying, oh, this should be a Category 2. Well, why force an applicant to go through that process? That doesn't seem very user-friendly. And if it's a cultural goal of Palo Alto to preserve listed historical structures, don't make it such an administrative hoop that someone has to go through. If it's historic, it's historic. If it's not, then don't apply for the exceptions. So that'd be my suggestion of a action item to request council to look at. How do we fine tune? And it's not making a new ordinance. That's a big administrative action. If it can be, if the council could agree that that's just an administrative fine tuning, that's one of my suggestions. Just make the process easy. If historic preservation is important, well then, let's let historic properties apply. Yeah.
Chair Bernstein, I just want to make sure that the umbrella of this is understood. So the HIE process is available to all categories 1 through 4. The bonus square footage is the perk that you're talking about, basically, the additional 200 square feet allowable to add onto a resource. So that's the incentive that you are talking about, specific to floor area, because the HIE is available to all homes in Palo Alto, historic or not,
Okay, thank you for that clarification, yes. Okay.
Martin, can I make a comment about?
Yes.
Just your comments reminded me of a prior discussion that we had about re-examining the categories 1 through 4, and we did have lengthy discussions about that, I think in even one of our workshops, but we never really came to a resolution about, do the current categories, are they still effective, are they still accurate? I know one discussion was have it either historic or not, just have one category, but we never got, we never really made any changes to how we view the different categories. I don't know if that's still something that we're working on or something that we've discussed and it just kind of came and went, or I don't, but it just his last comment just reminded me of those prior discussions.
So I'll weigh in on that. So again, this gets back to the fact that our ordinance is dated and has all of those categories and defined and what have you. So this gets to the elephant in the room, which is our historic ordinance.
Yeah.
And are we continuing on with that indefinitely, or is there some future date that we can tackle that? Because that is the elephant.
Yeah, I think there was one other specific thing too about the exceptions. It was that I think it's only for category 1 and 2 according to the ordinance, that if the first floor is higher than 3 feet, then the basement of that historic house doesn't count toward FAR. But if it's category 3 or 4, it does. So there are 2 examples where, okay, gee, I'm going to try to make that structure, the applicant's going to say, I need that category too. So, but it forces administrative stuff. So why make it challenging if you have a historic property, if historic properties are important for the city of Palo Alto? So there are two examples. Yeah. Okay. Board Member Wimmer.
So maybe in light of all the things that we're talking about, I think, could we, at our joint meeting, let's just say we have 5, I can't imagine we can really have time to discuss more than 4 or maybe 5, but maybe we identify these individual things, and the ordinance, updating the ordinance would be one of those things. Give them bullet points of all the things that we've been discussing, and let them respond with a prioritized list. Like we give them the Mills Act, we've been talking about that for a long time. The ordinance, we talk about that quite frequently. I mean, the context statement is sort of an ongoing project, it seems like. And then the inventory, that's another thing that's been on our list of things. So maybe we just say these are the profound things that we feel like need to be pushed forward. Council, what is your opinion on what our priorities are, and what's our leeway? Like, how can we just rewrite the ordinance? I mean, I know we can't, but I'm just saying, like, do we even attempt to do that, or do we attempt to figure out how to improve the listing of the inventory? Like there's one thing to come up with bullet points, but then how do we put those into place? Like, how do we make those things happen? I guess that would be a second phase. But I think if they gave us feedback, that's what we're looking for, is some kind of feedback from them. If they give us feedback and say, hey, yeah, now it's time to work on the Mills Act, that should be your priority. And we want to see how you can take that a step further. Maybe that's not, maybe their priority is something, the ordinance maybe. So I think that would be valuable for us. And that would be a successful meeting, a joint meeting, if we presented to them the things that we've been discussing for a couple of years, and then they give us feedback on what ones that they think that are the most important for us to continue to work on and pursue.
That's in light with Roger's initial sentiment, is keeping the really focused. And so I think, that's a good idea.
We've been doing this for...
Yeah, but that's part of our responsibility too, to help keep it focused too, and we can do that. Another comment I've thought about is how's the board feel about this for adding a topic? Again, it goes back to a process, and I guess that'd be under governance. Often, a project that comes to the HRB, it's a commercial project or a mixed-use project, residential, retail, office space. It might be like a 3-story project that comes to us fully designed, fully drawn, showing all details, minutia of details. Then it comes to the HRB, and for our response and for comments toward the for the ARB's review. Fully designed building, 3 stories, 40, 50,000 square foot structure. And then the staff report asks for our review. HRB, what do you think? Well, if HRB unanimous decision or a majority of decision is, well, we think that that 3-story portion should be put toward the back of the structure. I can't see how a developer who has just spent about $250,000 in fees and administrative review process is going to say, oh, sure, I'll just redesign the whole thing. That seems like an unfair request or burden on a property owner who's invested that much time and money to get to that point. And then it comes to the HRB. So somehow about the process that if it's going to affect some historical aspect of the community, that it comes for us way before an applicant has spent that kind of effort and money and time. I mean, that's investors' money. It's just, I can't see how that can make an applicant very pleased with the process when it comes to historic preservation issues. So maybe just the step in which it comes to the HRB before it gets fully invested. Vice Chair Bauer and I, we've done several projects in San Francisco. In San Francisco, the first step is what's the impact on historic structures? And it's a fantastic system. So there's an example where the culture of San Francisco is, there's a certain character to the city. And the first step is, what's historical impact? First step before you move on. And an example I just gave, it's, it's HRB is kind of one of the, almost the last step in the review process. So it's very difficult for the HRB to say something to make a major change if that seems appropriate for the historical aspect, that's going to get implemented. So how useful is that, I guess, for everyone? So I guess part of the governance is when does a major project come to HRB if it's affecting historic structure? And in San Francisco, if the answer at that day one is that no impact or not significant impact, then the developer gets to do his or her thing and then move on with the rest of the process. But that's my observation of major projects that come before us. Okay. Board Member McKinnon.
Well, it sounds like you're recommending that the process is not the best we have right here, just to be polite, and that we should make some recommendations that the process be changed. I think that's your essence of it, that we were handicapped by the current process.
Yeah. So my belief, to me, just let me make one comment and I'll go to you. My comment is that all of the processes governed and dictated by ordinance. Ordinances are a reflection of each city's culture. So San Francisco, the culture is historic, is important, character is important, and they're using that historic process to help maintain the desired community character. So, I guess it's, how strong is historic preservation for the culture of Palo Alto? And then the ordinance reflects that. That's all. Good. Roger.
Yeah, I would just quickly say that, it's the role of the owner and the architect or designer of a building that he does his duty to figure out what he has to go through before he starts doing anything. So to say it's, they wouldn't have done this building if they'd known about the rules. Well, they should have found the rules out ahead of time. I mean, anybody who's works in any city, like I don't do much work in San Bruno and that kind of stuff well, I did one job, but I go up there and find out everything I need to know before I get started. So to have a company like the building, one block over, they didn't do their homework. I mean, they didn't go to talk to planning department and to see, what's up. So.
So in San Francisco, you can't proceed unless you go through that step. So
right, and what I guess the point is, I think it's not totally our issue that they haven't followed the rules or have this problem, but they didn't do. It's easy to come here and have a preliminary meeting with just some sketches. So I think it's important to try to encourage all that. But I'm not saying I'm not going to be too upset if a builder comes in and has all these plans and we say no. I mean, they didn't do their homework. And that's the way I feel about it. So.
Board Member Bunenberg.
But supposedly right now, a part of the process is that the people who come in and ask for a building permit across the street or wherever it is now, it's supposed to be, the addresses are supposed to be checked, but it appears that some of them are falling through the cracks and maybe not getting checked. So maybe we're asking for a little more management of that thing that's probably on their computer to see that even buildings that we have some question about that still get looked at.
I think I'm going to chime in on that. I mean, I think it's the burden of the applicant and the initial meetings with staff that should sort that out. I think for our board, that's too much for us to try to conquer, helping applicants get too far down the road before they come to us. That's not our, we can recognize that that's unfortunate when that happens. I really don't see any easy process for us as a board to remedy that. I think it's up to the applicant and it's up to the staff, initial advice of staff. And if that's what happens, that's what happens. They wouldn't be the first or the last ones to experience that. So I don't think that's something that we should necessarily worry about too much. Good to mention, but I don't think we can worry about that.
So in our staff report, we could see the different items that the staff report gave to us about topics. There's training, governance, potential projects, outreach, inventory tracking, Mills Act program. And those are the items listed here. And context statement. Yes, I see that. You are correct. Yeah. Right. So any other additions for our meeting minutes today? So when Vice Chair Bauer and I meet with Mayor and Vice Mayor to add to the list. I'm sorry.
Could I just clarify?
Yes.
The report was intended not to say, number one, training. I think you should talk to the council about that. That's not what the intent of this is. You don't need to talk to council about training.
Right.
This is just a, hey, you guys asked for this, we did it.
Gotcha.
This is just kind of summarizing your year to some extent. I think the potential projects and the governance are the areas that you want to focus on. Where the potential projects are, I think, the Mills Act program and the modern age context statement are the kind of two, that we would need leadership from council on. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, I can send out the draft report and certainly to the chair and have that conversation, and the vice chair, and have the conversation about what staff is asking the council to do as far as leadership. And then we can have a conversation about that before our meeting with the mayor and vice mayor. But certainly any kind of presentation or, even a handout of, hey, we've been busy, look what we've been doing, I think would, could draw from this. If somebody wanted to collaborate with staff on that, I'm happy to do that. If we want to have any kind of images, it's always fun to have a 5-minute PowerPoint of, look at the projects we looked at this year kind of thing. And if you wanted to do something along those lines, I'm happy to help on that.
Okay, great. Okay, so after today's meeting, the next conversation is going to be with Vice Chair Bauer and myself as chair with Mayor and Vice Mayor. So, so all the comments that we're hearing today, David and I will have those. And then, go ahead.
And were you going to do that before our joint meeting? When is your meeting happening?
David and I will be meeting with Mayor and Vice Mayor before
the joint meeting. Okay.
Yeah. And before our final opportunity to talk about this, which is on August 24th, we have a placeholder in that meeting with the full board to, recap.
Excellent.
The plan for the 4 days later.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah. So Dave and I will be able to report what that discussion with Mayor and Vice Mayor is on the 24th before our joint. Yeah, good. Okay, excellent. Councilmember Holman.
As one council member, one of the things I would like to hear is if some of you, maybe staff could do it, but it'd be great if you guys could do it, is go through, and you mentioned some of the incentives, like for instance the 3 feet above grade and the HIE bonus square footage. If the incentives were consistent across the board to be applicable to all 4 categories and potential California and National Register, or those listed on California National Register, because several of them are applicable to all of those. I know from back Planning Commission days that they were applied across the board, but we didn't review everything. So if those could be made consistent, that's a way of getting some incentives for historic properties without changing the ordinance. I think.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if I can weigh in then, the two that were mentioned here were the, the floor area and the basement finished floor level under which basement is counted or not. Those were specifically in the ordinance, Chapter 1812 of the Municipal Code, regarding single-family homes, categories 1 and 2. So that would be an ordinance change if that's the critical incentives that you're looking at. But yes, there are other incentives in the code that are published on our website, et cetera, for subdivision incentive and others. So to the extent that an ordinance change would broaden that to categories 1 through 4, that can be on your list of things,
right.
and I can certainly let Hillary or Director Gittleman know that that is of interest, but I don't think the board has had a full discussion on that.
Right, correct, yeah. Okay, good. The other point I want to make, and I've always believed this, and I think it's also true, is that any applications for an exception, it's only an application, so none of these exceptions are rights. So you still have to apply for them, go through a process, and then each governing body can review and then make a recommendation to the director. So I think that can relax anyone who's concerned about, oh, look, what are all these exceptions to regulations? Well, they're not rights. So findings have to be made, for example. So, good. Okay, excellent suggestion, Councilmember Holman. Okay, any other any other comments on this agenda item?
I would
Roger.
like to say I've been sitting here and listening to all this and looking at my report. I have to admit, you guys do a really good job, the planning department up there, to come through with all this. And we try to read and everything, but I think we really appreciate the effort you guys do, or tend to forget the amount of work it takes to put this together, which is very useful for us and, well, for history as well. But I'm just saying, I thought I'd just say a nice compliment for, because we tend not to do that enough. So thank you.
Okay, any other comments from HRB or staff or council member on this subject? Okay.
I think we'll be back again on the 24th. Perhaps on the 24th, there can be further discussion, as Councilmember Holman suggested. It's kind of nice when 3 or more, perhaps, board members volunteer to present on one of the items to be discussed as part of the presentation. So that might be a good time to hash that out.
Right. Good. Okay, anything else before we move on? Okay. I don't know. All right. Okay, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is reviewing of draft minutes of June 22nd, 2017. Any motion to amend? Board Member Bunenberg.
I just have one, and it's on page 19, and it...
Is that packet page 19 or report 19?
Packet page 19.
Thank you.
And let's see. Now, is that... At any rate, it has to do with asking about a little tree out by Middlefield Road, and I was quoted as being inaudible, and it was a tree for Josephine O'Hara. And
I don't see your quote on packet page 19.
No, I somehow must have looked at the wrong page, but...
Quoted on packet page 27. I think that might be where the material is.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
It's a typo
absolutely
then?
right.
O'Hara?
27.
It's O'Hara? Is that?
O'Hara. Josephine O'Hara,
Okay.
who was like first director of the Junior Museum. So we want to see that protected.
Okay, any other corrections or amendments, or a motion to approve as amended? Okay, second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye, thank you. Next is any subcommittee items? Any subcommittee to reports? Seeing
None.
none. Board member questions, comments, and announcements? Seeing none. Any other issues for staff to bring up?
None.
Okay, seeing none. Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn, and we are adjourned. Thank you.